Welcome back to another mini episode for me. I'm your host, David Chambers, and this is the Authentic Man podcast. Today I'm going to talk about a question that I was pondering actually over the weekend, which is like, what does it mean to be a strong man? Because I think often we think of a strong man and we may think of physical strength, being big and strong and muscular and having endurance and fitness and being maybe completely unreactive to any difficulty that occurs in life, maybe being really smart and having like mental strength. I don't know what mental strength again would be like, not fazed by anything at all, being confident, being outgoing, being courageous. And I think some of those things kind of count. But I think that when we feel that we have to be that way all the time, it's actually super limiting, right? Because it's actually really hard to be that way all the time. So I come to believe that strength is actually about capacity, like the amount that you can hold, and that could be emotional capacity. I think is probably the biggest one. Could be mental capacity, the amount of information you can hold at one time without becoming maybe overwhelmed or shutting down. It could be the amount of physical stuff you can hold at one time. And I think, all those have something to do with emotional and mental things as well as like being able to hold a certain level of capacity for integrity. But the other thing I was thinking as well was range. Having the range of capabilities and attributes to respond to the moment in what it's required of you, right? So, for instance, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about like children, and we're like, actually, it was a podcast I recorded a few days ago, talking about kids. And if you say, for instance, your child won't go, he was talking about how his kid wouldn't go to get dressed and put clothes on to go out. Now, maybe if you don't have much range, you deal with this with that discipline, like put your clothes on now, we're going out, I'm not having any of your stupidness, put it on now, and you're really harsh and straight, and you kind of getting the job done in this like way that a disciplined man should be. But actually that could be super limiting if that's the only way you know how to be with kids. In many ways, that's how my father was. He didn't really know how to have different ways to actually, the range of ways to communicate to a child. And in the podcast, we're talking about how you could bring in humor, maybe you could make fun and be like, all right, daddy's not going to wear any clothes either, and we're going to go out naked, or you could use your capability of connection and being like, what's really going on for him? What does he really want? And this is responding to the moment, not just through our habits of how we think we have to do everything, but actually how what's really here, what's really in this moment now, and what's required of us. And that's when I say range. And I think when we think of this strongman idea, or what it means to be a strong man, we don't always have much range in that, right? That traditional idea of a man who, is strong, he can lift stuff, he provides for his family, he does all the traditional man stuff around the house. He may not be very good at nurturing, for instance, or he may not be very good at listening or empathizing, right? And my point here is that strength looks different ways in different moments, like we could talk about emotional resilience, right? And we might think, emotional resilience is that something bad happens, and we can just take it on the chin, doesn't faze us, doesn't bother us. But actually, like that's just one way of dealing with things. Like maybe something really sad happens and you're with a partner, you got a girlfriend, you got a wife, and she's feeling super sad. If you only have that capacity to like take it on the chin and move on straight away, then actually you can't empathize with her, and that will create disconnection in your relationship. Right? The moment will probably require you to really empathize with what's happened to her and why it's sad for her and why it makes her feel a certain way, and feel that with her. And it might be shedding tears with her. It might be, really being attentive to her sadness and how her sadness shows up for her, and supporting her in the ways that she needs in that moment. That's strength, right? Because if you're only seeing everything, if you think everything needs a hammer and you only have a hammer and you keep nailing everything, actually, there's a lot of times you're going to be using that hammer in the moments when you didn't need a hammer. You needed a chisel, or you needed some bubble bath or something like that. I know it's an odd comparison, but I just see this a lot where it's like strength doesn't just look one way, especially when we talk emotionally wise. Like strength isn't necessarily burying down what we're feeling and all the bad things that happen or the things we can't deal with. It's actually bringing them up, because it actually takes a lot more emotional strength to deal with stuff, to actually deal with it as it's happening, or find times that are right to deal with it, right? And when I say find times, I mean, like, say for instance, something terrible happens in my relationship. I might, not something terrible, but me and also have a disagreement in the middle of a shopping center. That moment right there might not be the opportune moment to deal with that disagreement. We may need to come home and sit down and talk about it. And that's another strength, is like having the, words will leave me today, having the kind of communication range to go, I'm going to deal with something difficult. I'm going to deal with this conflict conversation, and deal with this conflict conversation with strength, which is presence, which is awareness, which is like being really present to my partner and me and our relationship and the love that we have, instead of maybe being strong and trying to win. Because sometimes we see strength as winning. And when we bring winning into our relationships and discussions, actually it makes us very fragile, right? Because if we're focused on winning, and I talk a lot about this with couples that I work with, if we become focused on winning in an argument, being right, which can be seen like the quote unquote strong thing to do, we actually like really destroy connection. So like strength can be all those things. And then strength can be compassion, as I've talked about, empathy, like having the strength to see things from a bigger lens, a bigger point of view, instead of just yourself and you getting what you want in that moment, you know, taking deep, bigger, much wider awareness, and having the kind of strength to go, this is just a small thing in the grand scheme of my life, right? And having that sort of level of strength of mind is huge, right? And then like mental strength can be intelligence. It can be that. But like mental strength can also be like listening. Like instead of always being the most intelligent person in the room and having one's opinion, you know, being right and seem smart, it could be like really listening to everyone else and being like, let me actually help other people to be mentally strong or to be seen well, you know. Or it can be being focused and disciplined, right? It can be solving problems. But also there's mental strength in self-reflection and looking where we are maybe not as good as we'd like to be, or we're not showing up in ways that we'd like to be, or we're showing our weaknesses, right? And seeing our weaknesses. That's also a huge strength, because it's very hard to look at our weaknesses. You know, I've done a lot of this work with men and couples in the last few years. And it takes a huge amount of strength to go, hey, I'm not very good in relationship, or I'm not very good at intimacy, or I'm not very good at communication, or I'm not very good at emotional expression. And these things are important to me, and seeking help. That's another sense of strength, right? A way a strong man would show up is like seeking the help that he needs. And when I say a strong man, it doesn't necessarily mean everything the opposite means that you're a weak man. I'm just saying that, you know, we're playing with this idea of what is a strong man, right? Because sometimes we have a very one-dimensional look at what a strong man is. And I guess inside of this is like the vulnerability piece, right? It takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable and to be open up about maybe who I am, my struggles, my difficulties. You know, if you listen to my podcast for long enough, you can see that I will talk very openly about my struggles and difficulties, about my relationship struggles and dating struggles. I'm not perfect, but that same vulnerability allows me to be humble in the moment and not be, shall we say, defensive as well, because I'm not taking things personally. My identity isn't I have to be strong all the time. I can be gentle, I can be strong, I can be compassionate, I can be empathetic, because I see range as a strength, as I said before. And I think also there's a strength in being able to adapt to situations and moments that we don't know. Like being rigid things snap. If you ever look in science, rigid things snap. If something's rigid, it snaps. Like in this, you know, things that are adaptable and flexible, they survive, they are able to move into be with different situations and different climates and so forth. So there's a strength in adaptability, right? But to change to the different circumstances that come to us. And you could call range adaptability as well. Like it's just seeing that strength looks different in different moments. Strength looks different in different situations, right? And what that situation is called for. Like, and when I say called for, it's like, what would be the way that would, maybe in your relationship, liberate the most love? Or what would be the way in your relationship that would deepen the connection? Or maybe in your workplace, like, what would help your company thrive more? And sometimes that thing is very different from like, how can I look strong in this moment to the people who are observing me? And when we get quite hung up on looking strong to other people, we're often not going to do or choose a thing that's like in the best long-term interest as ourselves, because our awareness is kind of truncated to just this moment and how we're looking to other people, right? Because if we get stuck on this idea of like, I need to look strong to other people, maybe I need to look strong on social media, I need to look strong to this girl that I've just met in a bar, right? The thing you're going to do will be quite superficial, the superficial strength. It could be pick someone up, for instance, right? Or it could be insulting other men around you, or being arrogant and appearing that you're better than other people, right? That could be the thing you do, because that will make you look strong in the moment. But actually, what would be the thing that would liberate the most love and joy and passion and connection in that moment could be very different. And that can be, you can really ask yourself that question across the board in different areas. And the thing is about strong, from culture to culture, it shifts and changes, because strong doesn't just have one meaning. And it's just really, I love to bring this as a contemplation, because we often have this very singular way in which we look and say strong man, whether it's muscular, whether it's the way they're cold, the way they're uncaring, the way they do everything on their own, all that sort of thing. And it's just to really start to question that, because when we have a fixed idea of what strength looks like, we think to be seen as strong or to be strong, we have to give that persona to the world. And that means we have to hide things about ourselves. We have to hold back parts of us. And that's the stuff that starts to hurt us. That's the stuff we start to create shame around of. That's the stuff that we become defensive about if it does come out and get seen by others, right? And this is also the stuff that starts to, really hurt our relationships. For instance, you might think a strong man is a man who can last for hours in bed and please every woman he's with. If you find yourself maybe coming faster than you want, right? Or with a woman who maybe she doesn't have the capacity to orgasm, right? And you're stuck in this place where you've come quickly, she's not orgasming, because you want to appear to be strong, you may start to get frustrated and angry with her, and you may actually say something that's quite rude, right? Because you're getting defensive about your strong character in that moment, when actually what's needed from you to be a strong man is empathy, right? And compassion for yourself and the woman you're with. And these are lots of different moments where what we think is strong can actually be a real weakness to us, and those around us can hurt ourselves and hurt people around us. So if this episode's been useful to you, share it with somebody, share it with a friend, family member, a partner, whoever it may be. I was looking at my stats recently, and I see that, over 30% of my episodes are listened to by women. So, if you've got a partner or a brother or something like that, please share this episode with him if you feel it would be useful. If you're interested in diving into some of these topics a bit more deeper, especially around how we view ourselves as men, maybe overcoming confidence issues or issues in dating and relationship and intimacy, that's exactly the sort of work that I do with men in their lives, helping them create more depth, more compassion, more understanding, and more structure, if that's what's needed for them, because often our lives can feel a bit chaotic and disorganized. But most of all, I'm really helping men get a bigger perspective or different perspectives of their problems, so their problems become smaller and they find new solutions to those problems. So if that's something that feels like that'd be useful to you, you can catch me in the show notes. All my links are in there, and my email address if you'd like to talk about some coaching. Until next week, I say ciao, ciao.